In terms of the gay media, I think we're often presented with this idea of what is attractive or what we should look like or how young we should be or what shape we should be. And I think what I want to do, I don't do it in a particularly grand way, but I just want to show that lots of different people can be attractive in their own way. There isn't a particular standard of beauty that we have to live by and present.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Unapologaytic podcast. My name is Pierre. I'm your host and the founder of the ethical gay brand Unapologaytic. And today I'm talking to the talented photographer Adrian Lourie. Adrian photographs extraordinary men in all their glory. And the photos are published in the Meet Icons magazine, which is full of stylish, retouched, natural photos of the guys we fancy in their own environment. Thank you so much for being here.
No worries. It's nice to be here. Thank you for asking me to be part of it.
Let's start with the beginning. How did you get started in photography?
I probably started the turn of the millennium. I'd always had an interest in photography, but I'd never done anything with it in my youth, particularly apart from always being the person that documented and took photos. But it wasn't until I was in my sort of late 20s that I started to look at photography more seriously. And I did some night classes and that led on to further education. And in about 2005, I started a degree in photography. So I went back to college full time and at the age of 35, and I was 38 when I finished. And yeah, I used that 3 years to just immerse myself in photography. And I never really had the sort of intention to take it up professionally, but it became obvious through that doing that course that I had some talent and I had a drive to completely change my life. When I finished my degree, I moved to London in the hope that I could be a photographer, a commercial photographer. So I moved to London as soon as I finished my degree in 2007, and I became an assistant to another photographer who was actually younger than me. And then in about 2010, I went out on my own as a freelance photographer.
Who were your role models as photographers, or who are there any photographers that inspired you or are still inspiring you?
Yeah, I was pleased and so fortunate to be able to study and especially to go back in my mid 30s to do that. I absorbed as much of everything as I could. So yeah, I did have favorite photographers, but for me, really, it was just about looking at as much photography as I could and just absorbing that that whole new world, really. But yeah, people like I always remember saying to my course leader that I wanted to take photos like Nan Gold did. And my course leader said, yeah, you won't sort of find that kind of lifestyle in Newcastle. And of course I didn't, but I still to this day love her work. But it's so difficult for me to pinpoint certain photographers because I just love the medium. And all I do is buy photography books. And I'm always looking at lots of different people's work and get inspiration from lots of different people's work.
Are you tempted to go into videography? Because now it feels like
The
the,
video work and have done in the past. I've done videos, sort of corporate videos, and I've certainly with the Me project, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I've certainly played with video for that project as well. So yeah, it's definitely something that I kind of embrace for sure. I think for me, I'm still very much a stills photographer and I see the world in those kind of frozen moments. So video isn't always necessarily the most comfortable thing for me, but for sure I play with it and I use it on social media and I really appreciate that it's something that I need to embrace for sure.
yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I don't think there's a contradiction between the two. It's just
No, definitely not, definitely not. I think for me, I just like I say, I'm all about capturing those split-second moments, so I'm naturally more drawn to, like, a still image, and I definitely still prefer a still image, but I'm getting more and more creative with video as well as the further down the line I go with my career and my projects, definitely.
so now let's talk about the Meet project.
Yeah.
Where does the name come from?
The project or the idea for the project was the first thing to happen, and I was struggling to come up with a name, um, and it was actually a friend of mine who gave me the name, and he'll be very pleased that I'm admitting this today because I've always been quite ambiguous about it, much to his distress. But it was basically we were brainstorming names for the project, and we wanted something that was the idea for the project originally was a sort of modern take on the old physique pictorial magazines. So we wanted something that kind of embodied that, but was also a little bit ironic and but was also punchy and easy to remember. I wasn't thinking about it when he came up with the word. I didn't think about it in terms of it being a brand, but it served me well in not that respect now. So I'm really happy with it. And I'm actually really happy to give him credit for the name. But yeah, that's we just wanted something that was ironic and a little bit literal and just something that people would remember.
What draws you into shooting in hotel rooms?
Do you know, that was really just more about necessity because I generally only photograph guys in London because that's where I live, that's where I work, that's where I meet most of the guys. But often guys from abroad or guys from different towns in the UK get in touch with me because they're coming to London and I don't actually have any space of my own to shoot. My general day-to-day work and everything to do with me is always shot on location. Usually for me, I'm usually shooting in guys' own spaces, whether it be their living rooms or kitchens or gardens or wherever it happens to be. And by necessity, sometimes I'm taken to hotel rooms because that's where guys visiting London stay. It's something that I've always done over the sort of 13 years of me. And I just wanted to do a new project and it just became something that I became quite clued into the fact that I was doing these shoots in these kind of anonymous spaces, and I liked the idea of exploring that. And it was originally just going to be another magazine, but I also had an urge to do another book because I just a couple of years ago I produced a retrospective of 10 years of Meat magazine. So I just had this urge to make another book, and I thought it would be a nice idea to give it a theme because aside from the pictures normally being guys in their bedrooms, there isn't really a theme with me. I've never themed it. So I liked the idea of playing with a theme. And for me, that was just the most obvious thing at the time.
Yeah, because for many years I was a cabin boy. So I too shot loads of photos in
Yeah.
hotels all over the world. But in your opinion, as a photographer, is there a difference between shooting where the model lives, so like a domestic environment, and a hotel room?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing that I've actually thought about quite a lot. I guess when guys are at home, they often feel more comfortable because they're in their own surroundings. And that definitely has been advantageous for me in terms of shooting guys just turning up at their house and not knowing them particularly well and not really having that chance to create that rapport with them. But equally, and I think I found this when I was putting the book together, talking to some of the guys, hotel rooms, they're quite anonymous. And one guy actually described hotel rooms as a no man's land. They give you an anonymity and there's neutral spaces. I think certainly among the guys that I photographed in the hotel, they were equally as comfortable as they would have been if I'd shot them at home because yeah, it was a neutral territory, and we just had to make the best of the room and get cozy with each other quite quickly. in order to get some good pictures. So I think there are differences, but I can pretty much shoot wherever I'm, uh, wherever I land up. I think for my general day to day work, I'm often taken to places. It could be an office, it could be a corner of a kitchen, outside, or a hotel room or a bar, and I have to make the best of the space. I usually, when I'm doing portraits of people for work, I have to get an instant rapport with somebody and get the best picture of them in whatever surroundings I have. And I definitely take that with me. I don't spend a lot of time with the guys. It's sometimes only 35, 40 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. And I know that I have to create that intimacy in order to get some good pictures of them. And I can pretty much do that anywhere now. Send me anywhere and I can do that, I think. That is
As
a challenge though. Or maybe it is. I don't know. And it sometimes can be a challenge, but especially with guys that I photograph that live in London, because generally we all live in small rented rooms, and sometimes that can be a challenge, but it usually works. I hope it works.
the photos that are in the book and the magazines definitely work for sure.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And how do you choose the models and how do you find them, first of all? And then how do you choose them?
I'll pretty much I'll pretty much shoot anybody that gets in touch with me that wants to put themselves out there for the project. At the moment, I guess Instagram is the best place for me to find people because I've got quite a big following on Instagram. I tend to put a call out for people for specific projects. And then also, if I'm not doing anything specific at the time, I'll just put a call out for anybody to get in touch with me. I get a lot of guys that just get in touch with me off their own bat and ask me if they can be part of something. At the moment, because I've got a few things going on project wise, I'm being quite specific who I use for which project. But yeah, if you want to put yourself out there to be part of it, I'll consider anybody. And I'm happy to try and get as much diversity in the widest context of that as possible. So yeah, I usually don't have any trouble finding people to be part of the project at any one time. And if I do, I just put a little call out. And sometimes it's people that have friends of people that have been in a magazine, or people that have bought a t-shirt or been to a party or just heard about the project that want to be part of it. And they just get in touch with me and we try and negotiate it. At the moment, for me, the only major problem is because of work and because of my lifestyle, it's really difficult for me to get out of London, which I absolutely love to do, and I would love to do more. I've done issues of the magazine in Paris and in Berlin and in San Francisco, but a long time ago. I find it difficult to get out of London. I'd like to go north and go to Scotland and Brighton, and I'd like to get a bit more location diversity, but I'm held back a little bit sometimes through work. And when you live in London, you just end up getting trapped in London and it's difficult to escape.
Yeah, definitely. And in your opinion, what qualities make a good model?
For me, I always used to boast, and this is probably a little bit big headed, but I always used to say I could make anybody into a pin-up. And I think that's because of the way that I photograph the guys. It's very natural. It's very much about them in their own spaces, not overly posed, not overly styled. And I think I've probably photographed about getting on for 700 men over the 13 years of the project. I know it's crazy. And I've never really found anybody that I couldn't get a nice picture of, I suppose. So the definition of nice is very wide, but I'm always super happy with everybody I photograph. And yeah, I pretty much think I can get a good picture of anybody.
When people say, oh, I'm not photogenic, what makes somebody photogenic for you?
I think a lot of it is an attitude. I think trying to pull out people's confidence, I think is really what it is. Obviously, yeah, if you're absolutely the epitome of what is considered gorgeous, whatever that may be. And for me, that is a very wide range of different kinds of people. I think that may help. It doesn't always transfer to the photographic image, though. I've definitely photographed people who may be conventionally handsome or beautiful, and that doesn't necessarily come across in a picture. But yeah, I think that sort of, I think in terms of me, I think what works really well is just somebody's commitment to wanting to do it. And for whatever reason they want to do it, just the fact of them putting themselves out there, I think that gives a sort of energy to a picture, and that kind of makes them photogenic, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
No, it does make a lot of sense because in my experience, I think what makes someone photogenic is when they don't really care about how they look, they're just present. They don't try to please me
Yeah.
or anyone.
I think that's a really interesting idea, especially in the age of social media where people are very conscious of their image and projecting a certain image. I think for me, what I like to do with me sometimes is break that down a little bit. And that's why I get lots of guys that say, oh, what should I wear? Or how should I look? And I'm very much like about saying, just do what you want, wear what you want, wear what makes you happy, wear whatever you want to present to the world, but don't try too hard. Yeah, just be yourself. It's a bit of a cliche, but that's pretty much the top and bottom of it. It's definitely what I'm looking for with me. Just guys just being themselves and not trying to present too much of this perfect image.
Yeah. And you mentioned already briefly about that. How do you create a comfortable and safe environment for the models when you shoot?
I think it's just about me being myself as well. I'm Northern. I think that helps. I think I would like to think I have a sort of disarming Northern charm, and I'm very much about it being fun. I think sometimes when people talk to me about the project when they've seen it, they have this image of it being this kind of sexy kind of environment, but really, I'm usually just hammering on, telling them stupid stories, making jokes, and just doing my best to try and get that sort of rapport with guys. It isn't particularly, I think the pictures can be really sexy, but certainly the environment is often not. It's very down to earth and very ordinary. And my priority is always to make guys feel comfortable and relaxed and not feel as though I'm there for any other reason than to get some gorgeous pictures of them looking their best, whatever that means as well. And sometimes I would like to think I'm that guy who's giving them all the chat and making them feel a certain way, but I'm just not that guy. I'm like a cup of tea and talking to them about their,
Yeah, just a friendly guy.
yeah, I like to think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I've always been very conscious of not wanting to be the creepy photographer guy. That's very much like at the forefront of everything I do. I would never want to be, and I have heard the stories from guys who have photographed sometimes about experiences they've had with other photographers, and I just never want to be that guy that people talk about in a negative way behind their back. So I'm always at great pains to be like the fun, chatty northerner.
Do you ask about the model's sexual orientation? Or
It
either does that come up or does it matter?
it doesn't really matter. I guess because it's a gay magazine, it's, the projection of that is quite obvious. Yeah, I don't ever feel that I need to ask. I think our community at large has changed massively since I started publishing meat in 2010. And there's a spectrum of sexuality and gender within that. And I embrace everybody. And I don't ever, yeah, we talk about people's lives. And certainly with meat icons, I include some biographical details about them and they give me information, but that's usually after I've photographed them. I think there's a kind of assumption that most of the guys identify as gay or queer, but I don't feel the need to know that particularly when I'm shooting them. I guess my larger goal is to present the community in as wide and diverse range as possible. There isn't a sort of one size fits all for me, really.
Definitely not. Which is the beauty of it, really.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's tricky. And I think certainly the project has gone through phases where it's been more hipster or it's been more fairy and I think for me, the challenge is always to make it as diverse as possible in terms of age and body shape and in every way possible. But at the end of the day, I can only photograph the people that put themselves forward to be part of the project. So I just do my sort of best within that, really.
Have you ever had any guys who identify as straight wanting to model?
A few friends' boyfriends have mentioned it. A few of my girlfriend's boyfriends, usually with tongue firmly planted in their cheek. But I'm trying to think. I'm sure I probably have. I'm sure I've photographed every spectrum of person over the 13 years. I can't think of anybody specifically that told me they identified as straight, but I've often thought about this over the years that I would like to do a magazine with a bunch of straight guys. I think that would be a fun project, but I'd like to see how that kind of works out in terms of me photographing them and presenting them in a meet style. But I've never paid that much attention to it.
No, me neither. Although I do photograph quite a few straight men, but
Yeah.
then our work is different, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I've
Let-
definitely had a few selfies of my girlfriend's boyfriends in their underpants. Would so and so be any good for me? And I'm always like encouraging and give them positive feedback about it. But
oh,
nobody's
that
ever actually taken me up on it and come to be photographed yet.
Not yet, but
Yeah.
hopefully that will be the ultimate allyship.
I'm pretty sure that if I did a magazine of straight guys, it would sell pretty well. And when I'm working for me, I only really have half an eye on it as a commercial project. I definitely don't think about it primarily in terms of selling. I'm really happy that it sells. I'm really lucky that it sells. But I think if I did an issue with straight guys, it would probably do quite well.
The other thing to think about would be to avoid straight baiting, but that's another discussion.
Absolutely.
Um,
I would also say I try to avoid fetishizing any people in any kind of way. I try to avoid in whatever way that is. And it's certainly not something that I've avoided completely, but I try and avoid even things like leather and rubber. I want to see beyond that in a way. So I try and avoid fetishizing the guys in any way if possible.
mm, yeah, that's the impression I got when I watch or when I look at the photos and your work in general is that I feel a sense of equality and a
Yeah.
sense of just, this is the rest of us in a way. There are the goats that you see on Instagram, and then you got the guys in meat that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
just,
I think, especially in terms of photographing guys in their underwear, and I think this has changed over the years, but when I first started, sort of 2010, I was very conscious about trying to get guys out of the designer underwear and making it about everybody and not about trying to present an image of a brand. And I'm less strict about that now, but I still like to see guys just in their everyday stuff. I don't want to turn the pictures into adverts for underwear or any specific kind of brand.
yeah. And I think details like that, like underwear or like really loud pattern or anything like that, I think it really dates the image,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
That's
And
another thing.
but I certainly think I still meet guys who always pull out their best undies and I'm always like, oh, have you got something like a bit plainer and they're always, what, you want to photograph me in this? And I'm like, yeah, they're perfect. It's just they're all undies that they wear for the gym from like Sainsbury's or whatever. I'm always like more attracted to that because I think it levels everybody out in a way and it doesn't draw attention away from who they are as people.
Yeah, I think so too. It really works because it's a democratic kind of
Yeah.
uh, representation of gay culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think democratizing it is perfect explanation for it. But I would also say that within that, I think for me personally as well, there's still definitely a kind of attraction to that kind of no nonsense underwear as well. And in some ways, you might argue that it is fetishized in a way. And there's probably no getting away from that, to be honest. I think a lot of people really do respond to guys wearing just bog standard Marks and Spencer's underwear. So I'm not immune to the fact that that could be seen as quite fetishistic as well for
Definitely. But on the other hand, I also think there's a bit less objectification or the fact that this is who the guy is more
yeah,
than he's hiding behind some label.
absolutely. And I'm really conscious of that. And like I say, trying not to kind of draw people away from an image, a particular image, and just to see the guy as they actually are.
Mm. Can you talk about your creative process for each shoot?
I think I confront meat shoots in the same way I do with my regular work. I've usually seen the guy. We've usually had exchanged a few emails or WhatsApp messages, but I pretty much just turn up and just take what I find. I spend a little bit of time chatting to the guy. We may have a coffee while I'm setting up my equipment, which again is very basic. I don't really use a huge amount of equipment. And I basically just go with the gut feeling and how that guy is feeling on that particular day. And just, it's really just more about hanging out and for that brief moment, getting to know each other a little bit and talking about their lives and sometimes why they want to be part of the project. But I do very little. It's very basic. My creative process is very basic. I like to just go along and see what images I can get, what I'm confronted with, and what looks good and what feels good at the time.
Mm. Is there a common theme in why they want to be involved in meat?
It varies so widely. I've had every reason you could imagine, from people recovering from cancer or who've lost lots of weight and want to feel confident about their body, or people who've put lots of weight on and want to feel comfortable about their body, people who just want to present themselves to the world as they are. There's every reason. There are certainly narcissistic elements to it for some people, and that's fine as well. Why
There's
not?
nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But generally, it's people who just want to present themselves. And actually, I have to say, and I'm so grateful for this, it's usually people who know the project and likes the project and want to be a part of it. And I really love that. And the fact that I've been doing it for 13 years and I still get guys who want to be a part of it is incredibly gratifying. And if that's the main reason, that's all the better for me.
Definitely. What do you hope to convey with your photography and with meat in particular?
Mm. That's a really interesting question. What do I want to convey? And this has never really changed since the beginning of the project. I just want to show that we're all beautiful in our own way. There isn't a particular standard of beauty that we have to live by and present. And I think in terms of the gay media, we're often, and it is changing, but it is changing very slowly. But I think we're often presented with this idea of what is attractive or what we should look like or how young we should be or what shape we should be. And I think what I want to do, and it isn't, I don't do it in a particularly grand way, but I just want to show that lots of different people can be attractive in their own way and you don't have to look a certain way.
Yeah.
I think
I also like the idea that not only can you be beautiful, but you can end up in a magazine,
absolutely.
in a
And why
magazine
not?
that people buy. That's the thing that people are willing to spend money for. That's really something.
Yeah, and why not?
Exactly.
Why shouldn't we all be able to feel that? I don't necessarily feel that myself sometimes. I have appeared in the magazine a couple of times, but only fairly in fairly recent years because is something that I haven't always felt confident about either. Well, yeah, I think it's really important to show that, yeah, people will give you the best feedback from seeing you in a magazine that they've paid money for. I love that.
Mm.
And I'm eternally grateful for everybody that's ever paused or has ever bought a magazine. That is, it's amazing to me that happens, and I love it. And I'm very protective of that community as well. And I'm really always happy to interact with the guys that buy the magazine as well. And I've got long standing relationships with some of those guys. And the same with the models. I've got friendships with models that I've known long past their appearance in me. And I'm very protective of it as a community. And it's a very important part of my life.
That's the other thing I've noticed on the website is there's a section where you can upload selfies, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How
Yeah,
amazing.
I think particularly in terms of, like I said before, it's not always easy for me to photograph everybody or to get out of town. So I liked the idea that you could be part of the project by sending your own selfie in and you could still feel part of that community. That's really important for me as well. And I've carried that through to the print products sometimes as well. I've used people's selfies. I actually, towards the end of the original incarnation of Meet a couple of years ago, I did a selfie magazine and got people to send me selfies. And I made a whole magazine of them because, yeah, it's really important that guys can feel part of it without actually needing to be photographed by me. I love that. I love it if somebody sends me a picture of themselves in a Meet t-shirt or a jock and says, upload it to your Instagram. I love that. I can't get enough.
Do you see political aspect to your photography?
Again, in terms of me, I suppose that when I first started, I didn't see it as a particularly political project, but by the nature of what I was doing, where I was actually bucking the trend of gay media and presenting guys that were bigger or guys that were hairier or glimmer or in whatever way. I suppose by his very nature, it becomes political when you say that's what you're trying to express. And I think more recently, because politics in our community has changed so much, I think it becomes more political depending on who you photograph. And I try not to think about that too much because I don't want it to dictate how the project is. But yeah, I think by its very nature, it can be political. And I think in terms of photographing people with different gender identities, photographing trans men, those things are important, more important for me and my photography than anything else. I try not to make those things overt political statements. But I think, and I've done this with the last Meet Naked magazine, I put a trans man on the cover. And I think for me and for the project, that was really important and was definitely making a political point. I didn't make a fuss about it. I didn't even say anything about it at the time, whether that was obvious to people or not. If they just saw the cover, or I'm sure it was obvious if they bought the magazine. Yeah, for me, that was making a political point with a small p. But I certainly wouldn't want it to dictate what the project is and what the project becomes. It is, after all, pictures of men in their underpants.
Exactly. But there's definitely an element of using our voice as artists for something. So well
Yeah,
done for doing
definitely.
that.
Definitely. And it's important, yeah, it's important for me as a photographer to do that as well.
In an interview you shared earlier about the hotel diaries, you mentioned some eye-opening tales. So what do you mean by that?
I thought it would be fun. Obviously, when I meet the guys and photograph them, I talk to them about stuff in their lives. And I thought it would be fun with this project to find out if they'd had interesting experiences in hotels or funny experiences. And I just really put that word out there, just in terms of getting some little stories that could accompany the pictures. And a lot of them were, some of them were sexy, some of them were funny. There was one story about a guy who'd invited somebody over to his hotel room and they were having sex on two single beds pushed together and the guys fell between the beds. And for me, it was just to give a kind of context to the pictures, but also to share a little bit again about who those guys are and just through tiny anecdotes about their times in hotels. And I think if we think about it, we've all had strange or funny or interesting times in hotel rooms and I think it just was a nicer compliment to their pictures.
When I read that, I saw it as another way to make us all on the same, more or less on the same level, or bring the model even further down to us in a way.
Absolutely. I think for me, the most important thing is always the pictures. And for me, I want the pictures to tell the story. And I don't necessarily feel that you need any more information than that. But you can make up your own mind who this guy is. Or you can look around the room in the background of the image and pick up little details about them. But I also do like the idea of giving people a little bit more and just sharing little excerpts from their life. I think between those little anecdotes and the pictures, you get a good idea about who the guys are. And I like that. And I've embraced that more the longer the project's gone on. Initially, I was very much about just creating images. And if you didn't know who he was, that doesn't matter. It's not about that. It was just about this visual image of the person. But I think now I embrace the kind of including those tales a little bit more as well.
How do you balance sexuality, erotica, and video photography?
I think me has a very specific remit in terms of what I want to show and present to people. I think if you want to see guys aroused or guys in different positions, I don't know, you can find that so easily. For me, the charm of me is just about it not being too sexual. I think there's a charm to that I really like. And I'm pretty specific about where the line is for me with that and what I want to present with my work. And sometimes there's a balance, and sometimes the line gets crossed a little bit in either direction. But I'm very specific about it not being porn or not being too erotic. I think, and also I think my sensibilities around that, a guy lying on a bed in some white briefs and socks, I find that kind of sexy in itself. Do I need to show any more or do I need to see any more? I think that in itself is enough for me. And I guess then alongside that, you want to leave something to the imagination. You want people to want to see more. And I like playing with that. I don't know whether that answers that question, but
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, it does. Do you think when you mentioned the white briefs and the socks, instantly I thought, oh, Falcon. That made me think of, maybe that's me overthinking, but our formative years as
yeah.
gay men and as gay artists, really.
Yeah, I think those things all play into my kind of my ideas of how I want to show men for sure. I think the Freeman, I don't know whether this reference means anything to you, but like the Freeman's catalog underwear section that is something that I remember from being a kid looking at with some curiosity. And I think, and certainly I look at a lot of 1950s and 60s pin-up magazines, which again were very subtle and quite naive in a way. And I think that kind of informs what I want to show as well and how I want to present the guys. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of imagery mixed up in my head. And I think what I present is the culmination of that.
You mentioned the word naive, and when you was talking about the lines you didn't want to cross and stuff like that, I was thinking already about the word innocence.
Yeah,
And
I think I don't know whether naive or innocence is are the right words, but there's something I think I always in a very sort of British way, I always come back to the word charming. There's a charm to it, and that could be seen as naive or innocent. I'm not sure how many of the guys are that innocent, how many of any of us are that innocent. But for me, it was always just about that antithesis of what we're presented with as gay men or queer men. We can find images of everything online now. And for me, it was very specific about doing something different and just showing like a softer side or a more naive or innocent side, whatever you want to call it. Because, and there is nudity in the magazine, that's not going to be avoided. But for me, that's the least interesting thing about it. And I think sometimes people say to me, oh, there's not enough naked men, or why is this guy not naked? And I'm like, how far do you have to look to find a naked man? You can find a naked picture anywhere. This is something very different. And you either get that and buy into that idea or you don't. And thankfully, lots of people do. And lots of people do see that kind of the charm in that. And, you know, the
Definitely.
innocence of that is quite nice to see, I think.
I think in the age of so easily accessible porn, in the age of OnlyFans and all of that, there's no judgment in that. But it's a nice
Oh,
contrast.
yeah.
It's a nice way to actually do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an audience for everything. And I make no judgment about OnlyFans or pornography at all, but it was just, I had a point of view that I wanted to present. And I think at the moment, that's what Meat does. It presents my point of view of how I want to show these guys.
How has your art evolved since you've started Meet?
In terms of me, I think the style has changed a lot because when I first started, I very much photographed the guys in the same way that I photographed people for my day job, which, you know, for a lot of the time is portraits for newspapers and magazines. Everything was very highly lit. Everything was bright. I was quite scared of shadow and I avoided kind of shadow and highlight. I just wanted everything to be super bright and super graphic. But I think certainly over the last couple of years where I've been making meat icons, I really wanted to do something different. And I only shoot in natural light. And that's been really scary and a real challenge and something that I sometimes still struggle with. But I try to sort of embrace the shadows now and create more of an atmosphere through the work. So I guess in terms of me, that's the biggest way it's evolved because I never take lights now. I always, even if I'm shooting at dusk or even in very low light, I always try and shoot in natural light. And yeah, my mantra has been about embracing the shadows and not being frightened to show like darker images. And I really love that. And I love that the work has evolved in that way.
I saw your day job, as you call it. And yeah, it's really nice to see the difference of style.
I think you can still tell it's me, whichever one you look at, but there's a for the work I do for newspapers and magazines, there's very much a remit of making everything bright and colourful because that's what looks good on a page. But so it's nice that I can move away from that with me. And if I see something more interesting in terms of light, I can embrace that. And I still find it very challenging, but it's always a buzz when I see a nice image that, like, oh, yeah, no, I shouldn't be as afraid of natural light and I shouldn't worry about everything having to be bright and colorful or tidy. I'm very much about trying to just show what's in front of me with me. And I hate it when guys want to tidy their rooms and put all the lights on. I'm very much about just showing what I'm confronted with. And I hope that authenticity shows in the images.
I really think it does. It
And I
really
think
does.
for me, yeah, it's again about having that authenticity and presenting something that's very real, as opposed to picturing a newspaper or a magazine that is about selling an image or selling a product or This is very much about being authentic and being true to the guy that I'm photographing.
What advice would you give to aspiring photographers of the male form?
I guess be authentic, present a point of view, be original. I see lots of work that's inspired by me that's really interesting, but I also feel sometimes that it's definitely more about the guys' bodies or presenting them in a more two-dimensional way. I think be clear about what you're trying to say or what you want to say, and try and get more than skin deep. That's always what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to see beyond them as just a body. I want to see. Somebody once said to me that every time they had their photograph taken, this was not related to me, but every time they had their photograph taken, they felt a bit of their soul was stolen. And I definitely don't want to steal anybody's souls, but I want to see a little bit of their character. And a lot of the times I look at work that's very similar in style to me in terms of physique work or pictures of guys or whatever, and I don't feel an emotional response to it. And I think I would like to think with me that people have a more emotional response to the picture that they see. So I think, yeah, it's just about trying to capture a little bit of somebody's spirit for that time that you're with them. And yeah, be authentic and don't feel you have to present anything in particular that doesn't feel comfortable.
How do you see your work fitting into the broader context of gay queer culture?
I hope it fits in there somewhere. Always surprised that I don't get more attention for the project. And it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine. The I think I'm sometimes overlooked in terms of what I'm doing, and I'm never entirely sure why that is. Sometimes I think it's because I'm older and I'm not cool, and people don't see the project as cool. And sometimes I think it's just been around for so long that people take it for granted. And then more often than not, I really don't think about it. I just do what I do and I'm just getting on with it. And if people buy it, that's brilliant. If people, like it on Instagram, that's amazing. But I'm just going to keep doing it and keep doing it until I don't want to do it anymore or I find a new project. But I think certainly when I did the last book, which was a 10-year retrospective book from 2010 to 2020, and I looked at the project for the first time in the context of that decade, I think for me, it was very much a record of gay men in London at that time. And there were lots of changes with how we looked and how we presented ourselves and how we identified ourselves. And for me, that felt like a really important piece of work. And it sold all right. I don't think it was seen as widely as I would have liked it to have been. And I think it probably wasn't appraised in a way that I would have liked it to have been and embraced in a way that I would have liked it to be. Because I do think there's an importance to it in a way, or I don't want to sound too grand about it because I really just do it because I love the whole project and I love that I'm able to do it and I can make it work with very little money and, with my small but loyal audience. But I do think it does have a relevance to us as men and non-binary people as well. But I try not to think about it too much. I don't want to get bogged down with where it fits within the culture, but
Yeah.
I do still think it's really important. I still think it's really important to see, like we said before, a magazine that people will buy with somebody on the cover who doesn't necessarily fit the beauty standard of the community or looks a little bit different, or I still think it's really important for that to be there. And I think as a culture, we still have a long way to go to normalize that. I really do. I still look at a lot of mainstream gay media and it's still very generic and still only fit within a certain criteria. So I do still think it still has a place and it's still important.
I don't know if it's a similar question, but what do you think or hope people will take from the Hotel Diaries or the Meet Icons, the whole Meet project?
It's such a cliche to say, but that we're all, it's about celebrating our difference and embracing that. And I think if people, and certainly the feedback I get from people who both pose for the magazine and buy the magazine, that it's refreshing for them to see somebody who doesn't fit the stereotype of what it means to be a gay or queer man. And I think if people take that away and it maybe changes some people's perception, that's all I could hope for. And I photographed somebody. I've had this on my mind a little bit this week because I photographed somebody for a new project, which is going to be a calendar for next year. And I photographed a guy last week who's deaf and wears two hearing aids. It's not the first time I've met or photographed him, but it's been a long time. And we had a long conversation about how people perceive him as a gay man because he's deaf. And he showed me some grinder messages that he'd received where people just completely dismiss him as soon as they see that he's has hearing aids, or they find out that he's deaf, or they block him. And he showed me some really cruel messages. And it really made me appreciate that we still have so far to go. And people have a very surface, very social media friendly idea of themselves as kind and we're everybody's embrace. But the reality of that is not always the case. And I think if I can show a little bit of diversity and people can and appreciate that or embrace that, that's a win for me. And it's not changing the world at all. It's just pictures of guys in their underpants, but it's doing a little bit to change people's perception. And I really just can't hope to do anything more than that.
Yeah, but changing perception, that is changing the world.
So I am
So
changing the world in
you definitely are.
one naked portrait at a time.
That's right. You're a superhero. Shall we call you Super Me?
I've, I've already got the t-shirt, so halfway there.
Perfect. So now you just need to choose your brief.
Definitely.
And another cliche question, but I have to ask you, do
Okay.
you have a favorite photo from the book or from the latest book, The Hotel Diaries?
And that would be so unfair to say. I'm very much uh, a creative person who is super critical of everything. I haven't actually been able to look at the book since it came back from the printers because I spent so much time with it. It took me about 7 months to put it together, and I'd probably spent a year photographing it before that. And I still haven't managed to look all the way through it because I'm so critical of everything. And and I tend to look at the work so much that I sometimes can't see the wood for the trees and never know what's good. But at the same time, I'm always happiest with what I'm working on at that particular moment. So at the moment, I'm working on meat icons every month. And the best one is always the one that I'm just about to publish. And then I just completely move on to the next thing. I think within that, there are certainly lots of pictures that I really love, but I couldn't pinpoint a particular set or a particular guy. I am so grateful to everybody that will put themselves out there for the project. And I defend them to the hill and I love them all equally.
I was expecting that answer.
And it's the truth. It's that.
I can definitely relate to that. It's very difficult to choose between whatever output we come up with, really.
Absolutely.
And what next? So you mentioned the calendar.
Yeah,
Is
so
there anything else?
I'm working on 2 calendars. I'm gonna do a calendar for meat icons, which I did last year. So the 12 meat icons from this year, January to December, will form a calendar for 2024. And I'm also working on a naked calendar for 2024, which is gonna be new guys, in the book. And that was a project that I did for about 5 years and then stopped doing, but I'm bringing that back this year. And I'm also working on another book, which is going to be guys photographed outside. So I've got, yeah, 3 or 4 projects on the go at once. I would really like to do over the next couple of years 4 books in a similar style to the Hotel Diaries book on a theme. So the next one I think is going to be called Let's Go Outside. And I've just started to shoot that, but it's
Right.
very early stages. It's quite a tricky prospect to take the guys out and find places that I can shoot them, but it's a work in progress. So it's
Very
got
good.
lots of things.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be good.
Some things to look forward to,
Things,
even.
yeah, absolutely.
And finally, an apologetic tagline is embrace who you are. So we're pretty much on a similar wavelength.
Yeah,
So what's your idea of embracing who you are?
who I am personally. I think it's something that I find really difficult. And I think as I age as well, I thought I had problems with embracing who I was in my 20s, but in my 50s, I still struggle. But I think it's just about being true to yourself. And again, I go back to authenticity. I try to live as authentically as possible and as honestly as possible. And I think that's not always easy. That's
No.
not always the easiest position to take, but I think that's probably I think that's probably me embracing myself as much as I
Mm.
can, but it's not always easy. It's not always easy.
No. No, it's very simple, but not easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So finally, where can people find your meat?
Ha 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 ha. I have a website called meetzine.com where you can buy the magazine and buy the book. And I'm on Instagram at meetzine and Twitter at meetzine. So I'm all over the internet, but yeah, mainly on the website. I blog on there and I post lots of stuff on there and but on Instagram as well. Yeah, get in touch.
Get in touch indeed. Was there anything else you wanted to share or talk about?
I think I'm pretty happy. I think I've been well and truly grilled.
Yes, you have.
Because I don't spend a lot of time talking about the project really outside of the guys that I meet to photograph. So it's an interesting thing for me to think about the project in terms of how other people see it and what people want to know about it because I don't talk about it a lot. So it's nice to have that chance to reflect on what I'm doing and what I've done with it. And yeah, I think I'm pretty proud of it.
You should be. No, it's really great work. Great
I'm
work.
glad you think so. I'm
Well
only
done.
sorry about the light in this room, which I think at least it's authentic.
Exactly. That's all we can do. Let's embrace who we are and embrace the lack of life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again, Adrian.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, thank
And
you.
all the best for the next projects.
It's lovely to meet you. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. Feel free to comment, share, and don't forget to go and check Midzi. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Uh,
Bye.